Last episode we explored 10 major predictions with an incredible level of detail that were fulfilled over more than 3 centuries. Things are about to get even more detailed as we approach the grand conclusion of this final war at Armageddon. Many prophecies often have a forerunner or prototype. Let's examine the prophecy of the rise of an evil ruler, which will be a foreshadow of the ruler of the last days.
In his place shall arise a despicable person, to whom the honor of kingship had not been given. But he shall come at a time of prosperity, and shall obtain the kingdom through deceit.
The rise of an evil king of the north. Following the death of Antiochus III the Great, a real sick and vile person took to the throne of the Seleucid kingdom, who in scriptures is the king of the north. Almost 3 major predictions are given of this man, spanning more than 12 verses. His name is Antiochus Epiphanes. He was so deceitful and treacherous that even the Romans mockingly nicknamed him Epimanes, meaning madman. According to prophecy, he is a foreshadow of the nature of the Antichrist, and you will do well to observe the total evil of this man. Antiochus's original name was Mithridates, and he was the third-born son of Antiochus III. Naturally, being third-born, he was not entitled to the throne. The Syrian king Philopator was assassinated, leaving a power vacuum. With the rightful heir being imprisoned in Rome, who was Demetrius I Soter, and the other son that was entitled to the throne only being a child, Antiochus approached the king's advisors with what would result in a power grab. Antiochus Epiphanes convinced the advisory council that due to this vacuum, he would take over the throne as a co-regent king. But this was all a ruse, and he was using peace to gain a foothold into the kingdom. History reveals that Epiphanes murdered the legal heir to the throne, young Antiochus, and then remained as king of the Seleucid Empire of the North. In assuming the throne, he changed his name from Mithridates to Antiochus Epiphanes. The name Epiphanes means God manifests, and this gives an insight into the nature of his character. It took 359 years for this 11th major prophecy to be fulfilled in sequence. The level of detail of all the remaining prophecies is astounding. Let's read for ourselves how powerful the Syrian king became. The 12th major prophecy involves the deceitful methods of this evil northern Seleucid king. Most scholars agree that Daniel's next recorded prediction, revealed by the angel, is general in nature, and although it contains specifics, is rather an overview of the methods Antiochus used to acquire territory and wealth. He is noted for sweeping away large armies, as well as the Prince of the Covenant. Who was the Prince of the Covenant? Historically, Onias III was the high priest of Judah, who was known as the Prince of the Covenant. He both opposed and resisted attempts by Antiochus to Hellenize the Jews, and was murdered in 172 BC. Surprisingly, he was murdered by a fellow Jew who stole temple treasures to get favor with Antiochus. Daniel further prophesied that the king of the north would not have any integrity, offering alliances, and then would use deceit to gain power. Another particular aspect Daniel describes is the division of wealth of the population of territories not under his complete control. Simply, those who were sympathetic towards him would be rewarded for their loyalty. Having given a general overview of the methods the northern king would adopt in assimilating wealth, Daniel prophesies the next attack would come from the king of the south, who would assemble a great army and wage war against the king of the north. Historically, it was the southern kingdom of Egypt that sent a large force into Palestine and Phoenicia in 181 BC, which was previously captured by Antiochus III. At first, Egypt met with success, but eventually the southern forces had major setbacks, resulting in the capture of Philometor, the king of the south, while Antiochus Epiphanes extended his territory into Memphis, a key city in the eastern parts of Egypt. So now the Seleucid Empire of the north was now firmly entrenched in parts of the southern Egyptian Empire. Since the Egyptian king was young, his two advisors, Elias and Lennias, encouraged the king to recover territories originally held by Egypt. This plot is possibly related to the false advice given by the council, knowing that the king was no match for Antiochus Epiphanes. It took 362 years from the date of the prophecy for its words to be fulfilled in sequence and to the T. The 13th major prophecy shows just how the Seleucid northern king would be a great anti-Semite.
As for both these kings, their minds shall be fixed on evil, and they shall speak lies at the table, but it shall not succeed, for still their end shall be at the appointed time. Then shall he return into his land with great prosperity, and his mind shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall take action and then return to his own land.
Daniel cited the next event involved treachery between the young captured king of the south and the king of the north. The basis of the scheme would be a negotiation around a table covered with lies and evil discussions. But the elaborate scheme would not work, for the end is still designated for the appointed time. We learn that the appointed time refers to God's timetable, where the battle between the king of the north and the south comes to an official end. Historically, the Egyptians lost all hope for their king's return and appointed Philometor's brother, Physcon, as his successor. When Antiochus heard of this new appointment, he devised another cunning plan. He entered into an agreement with this prisoner king that he would attack his brother and government and reinstate Philometor to the throne so that he could ultimately unite the two kingdoms under his own authority. So Antiochus Epiphanes sent a small but powerful force into the western parts of Egypt, and Philometor was reinstated as king. Of course, as Daniel had prophesied, neither kings were intent on honoring the deals that were made. In anger, Antiochus Epiphanes went against Jerusalem. Its fulfillment is described in the apocryphal book of Maccabees, where false rumors spread of Antiochus Epiphanes' death, which resulted in his appointed puppet high priest, Menelaus, in being overthrown by a zealous group of 1,000 Jews. Antiochus, believing that the entire nation of the Jews was in revolt, became enraged, passed through Jerusalem, and restored Menelaus as the high priest. Over a period of just 3 days, 40,000 men, women and children, including babies, were slaughtered, and another 40,000 Jews were taken into slavery. At the same time, he entered the Jewish temple and ransacked it of all its valuable treasures, before returning to his own land. 4 years after the previous prophecy, and 366 years after it was uttered, the 13th major prophecy was fulfilled.
At the appointed time he shall return and come into the south, but this time the outcome shall not be as it was before. For ships from Kittim shall come against him. Therefore he shall be intimidated and shall turn back and be enraged against the holy covenant and shall take action. He shall turn back and show regard to those who forsake the holy covenant.
The 14th major prophecy involves how the Seleucid king would have his powers clipped. After Antiochus Epiphanes had returned to his homeland, Philometor reunited with his brother Physcon, and this southern kingdom of the Ptolemaic Empire drove Antiochus' troops from the fortress of Pelusium in Egypt. When Antiochus heard of the success in dispelling his forces, he gathered everyone together and in 168 BC headed for Egypt with the full intention of annihilating and taking over the southern kingdom. However, the southern kingdom of the Ptolemaics found favor with the Romans. When Antiochus' troops began to lay siege on the city of Alexandria, Roman ships intervened from Cyprus. The Roman commander drew a red line in the sand and he informed Antiochus Epiphanes that should he not leave the shores of Egypt with immediate effect, he would face the consequences of war with Rome. With the defeat of his father, Antiochus III, still fresh in his mind, Antiochus immediately withdrew his forces and headed for his home in Syria with his tail between his legs. Apparently humiliated in front of his armies, Antiochus sought to take out his anger once again upon Jerusalem, the Jews, and their temple, and put his sights firmly on causing its destruction. The prophetic words were fulfilled more than 367 years after it was prophesied.
Forces shall come at his order, and they shall profane the sanctuary and the fortress, and shall take away the daily burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that causes desolation. And those who act wickedly toward the covenant, he shall corrupt by smooth words. But the people who know their God shall be strong and take action.
The 15th major prophecy, rendered in sequence, described how the northern king would then desecrate the Jewish temple. As Daniel foretold, Antiochus, in his disappointment and belittlement of not gaining control over Egypt, entered Jerusalem to crush the religious establishment. In 168 BC, prohibiting any Jew from offering the daily sacrifices in the temple area. In addition, the observance of the Sabbath and other religious festivals, including circumcision and food laws, were banned. Anybody who contradicted this edict was executed. As pagans typically had a statue of their deity situated in the inner courts of their temples, it is believed that this was the abomination of desolation, described by Daniel, where Antiochus placed a pig, an unclean animal, in the temple of the Jews. The temple was also renamed the Temple of Zeus Olympius, implying that a statue of Zeus was installed in the temple sanctuary. The Jews were ordered to sacrifice swine and other unclean animals and to build an altar to idols. Antiochus Epiphanes was a master manipulator and went about dividing the Jewish nation between the liberals, who were quite prepared to walk away from their covenant with God, and those that remained loyal to the covenant. There were a few committed Jews in Jerusalem who formed a band and resisted both Antiochus Epiphanes and his kingdom. This group became known as the Maccabees, and Daniel is about to describe another prophecy with them at the forefront. 367 years after it was prophesied, the Jewish temple was desecrated.
And those who are wise among the people shall instruct many. Yet they shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by plunder, for some time. Now when they shall fall, they shall receive a little help, and many shall join with them insincerely. Some of those who are wise shall fall, be refined, purified, and cleansed until the time of the end, for the appointed time is still to come.
The Jews were prophesied to then resist as part of the 16th major sequential prophecy. During this period of persecution led by Antiochus Epiphanes, many leaders rose up to minister to those around them and called upon them to resist. There was a call for obedience and for the Jews to commit to the laws of Moses. A priest named Mattathias from the hills of Ephraim paved the way for the eventual independence of the Jewish race. An officer of Antiochus came to his city to enforce his religious embargo. The officer was killed, and Mattathias and his 5 sons led a guerrilla resistance in the foothills of Israel. This guerrilla band then attacked any Jew who was loyal to Antiochus. After a short period of resistance, Mattathias died, leaving the resistance in the hands of his 5 sons, and this guerrilla group grew as their resistance tested the Seleucid forces. Antiochus never again entered the territories of Palestine, but would send forces in an attempt to squash the Maccabean revolt. As for Antiochus, in 164 BC, with problems in the east, he died in Persis, which is today in Iran, and he died of a strange stomach illness. His son, who was too young to rule, was assisted by General Lysias as a co-regent king. Eventually, the Maccabean revolt achieved success, and General Lysias agreed that their religious freedoms be restored. We are now reminded that although Antiochus played a part in this great war, the end of it will still occur at the appointed time. Although there are a minority of conservative Christian scholars who attribute the next 3 verses to Antiochus Epiphanes, the vast majority believe that this is referring to an end times king who represents the king of the north. As futurists, we call this end times king the Antichrist, as he fulfills and is aligned with both Old and New Testament prophecies.
And the king shall do as he pleases, and he shall exalt and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak outrageous things against the God of gods. And he shall prosper until the time of wrath is accomplished, for that which is decreed shall be done.
So the 17th major prophecy involves what many believe is the rise of the future king of the north. Now the reasons why this cannot be Antiochus Epiphanes are numerous. He died before the Maccabean revolt was complete and never lived to see his failure reversed. The text associates this king directly with the time of wrath, also translated as a time of indignation, which relates to the infamous Jewish prophecies of the day of the Lord. As the prophecy only completes in chapter 12, it speaks of a worldwide event which results in the Jews being delivered and saved. Very similar words are used by Jesus forecasting events before his second coming. As we consider other details in this passage, it confirms that neither Antiochus or anyone else from the Seleucid Empire ever fulfilled the details mentioned. Daniel describes this king at the appointed time as doing as he pleases. Not even Antiochus Epiphanes could do as he pleased, evident from him being stopped by the Roman ships in his attempt to take over the southern kingdom of the Ptolemaic Empire, the king of the south. Then in his attempt to decimate the Jewish religious system, he also met with resistance. He could hardly do as he pleased. Daniel provides a further aspect of this final ruler as exalting himself above every god. But there is also no historical evidence that Antiochus Epiphanes ever claimed to be God or that he was greater than the gods. Another trait which, unlike the former, can be attributed to Antiochus Epiphanes is that he is described as blaspheming the God of gods. The God of gods is a name associated with Jehovah, the God of the Jewish and Christian faith. Since Antiochus Epiphanes did halt Jewish rituals and placed an abomination in the temple, this can be interpreted as a form of blasphemy against God. Daniel, in describing the end times ruler as prospering until the time of wrath is accomplished, does provide for further debates amongst conservatives and liberals alike, and even between themselves. It is also the final events described by John in the book of Revelation, which occurs before the immediate return of Jesus Christ. The phrase, "what has been decreed will be done," is simply a declaration by Daniel that all prophecies associated with this period of wrath will be exhausted during this time. Even Daniel's final account associates the final abomination of desolation with the resurrection of the dead, indicating a prophecy which remains unfulfilled.
Neither shall he regard the gods of his fathers, nor the one desired by woman, nor show regard to any other god, because he shall magnify himself above all. But instead he shall honor the God of fortresses, a God whom his fathers did not know, shall he honor with gold and silver, and with valuable stones and costly gifts. And he shall deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. Whoever acknowledges him, he shall grant considerable honor, and he shall make them rulers over many, and shall divide the land for a price.
The 18th major prophecy concerns the character of this end times king. The king is unique, as he will not regard the God of his fathers. Even those who attempt to attribute this to Antiochus Epiphanes have great troubles doing so, as he is credited as worshipping many gods and even enforcing idol worshipping. Some scholars suggest that since the phrase God of his fathers is used frequently to refer to the Lord himself, this will imply that this evil ruler will have Jewish origins and would be known as an apostate Jew. While often treated with contempt, the phrase God of his fathers has 6 precise matches in the Old Testament, with the exact words used another 20 times in the Old Testament in a Jewish context. This ruler is further described as not being the one desired by woman. Firstly, since every mother in Jewish history desired to be the mother of the Messiah, it indicates that this future ruler's hatred for Jesus, since he will not be the desire of woman. The second suggestion is that he will not be the desire of woman, since he will be homosexual, rather favoring the love of man. The last suggestion is that he will be particularly cruel to women, which will be evident in his life. While it is possible that all or any of these views may be correct, he certainly will not be popular amongst women. Daniel emphasized that he will show no regard for any god, since he will magnify himself above all. He shall rather honor a god of fortresses. Since this word is also translated as strongholds, it does suggest that Satan will be his god. In support of this, John describes an end times ruler as a beast in Revelation and confirms the relationship between this Antichrist beast and Satan. So we learn that this king will divide the land for a price. While Antiochus rewarded those who listened to him, the end times king of the north will actually give property acquired to the highest bidder, ensuring the loyalty of the rich in his kingdom. 2,500 years later, this 18th major prophecy remains unfulfilled. The 19th major prophecy includes all the finer details which will occur at the conclusion of this great war. So let's read for ourselves Daniel's account of what happens next. speaks directly of the times of the end, where this great war, which started between Persia and Greece, would transcend over centuries to major conflicts between the Seleucid or Syrian Empire of the north versus the Ptolemaic or Egyptian kingdom of the south. This is an account of the final conflict between these long-time arch-rivals. The aggression this time will be from the Egyptian king of the south, who will be completely run over, likened to the devastation left behind by a whirlwind. Although the armies are described as chariots, horsemen and ships, all futuristic scholars accept that this was merely for the ancient generations to understand the large land, sea and potential air force decimating the nations of the south. Since the invasion itself is likened to both a whirlwind and a flood, it also emphasizes the swift authority which this end times ruler decimates the king of the south. He will enter the beautiful land, a reference of endearment to the Holy Land. Countries such as Edom, Moab, and the sons of Ammon are specifically excluded from his attack. Edom was a nation founded by Esau, located in the southeastern parts of Israel, of which Mount Seir was an important landmark. Today its former territories are associated with Jordan and a small part of Israel. Moab is the location of the modern-day country of Jordan, who have remained in the same area as their forefathers. Likewise, the sons of Ammon was located on the east side of the Jordan River, with its ancient chief cities of Ammon, now called Amman, the capital of Jordan. So we see that all three of these former prophetic kingdoms today describe the country of Jordan, Israel's neighbor and ancient rival. Since this end times ruler spares the country of Jordan, it is likely that the Jordanians are not only sympathetic to his cause, but are also supportive of him. The fact that this king of the north will reach out his hand against other countries seems to imply that the southern kingdom is not just representing the nation of Egypt, but a conglomeration of existing countries. Egypt will not only be overthrown quickly, but it will be pillaged of all its wealth, including its gold and silver resources. Both the Libyans and the Ethiopians are also described as being desolated, ransacked and looted by this powerful king of the north. 2,500 years later, this major prophecy also remains unfulfilled.
But news out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him, and he shall go out with tremendous rage to destroy and utterly sweep away many. And he shall pitch his royal tents between the sea and the beautiful holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, with no one to help him.
The 20th major prophecy of this great war prophesies just how this final Syrian northern king will be defeated. This future ruler's blitzkrieg victory over the southern countries is short-lived, as he hears reports coming from the east, which troubles him. Upon hearing this, he throws a temper tantrum and embarks on a quest to destroy and annihilate many others. His final place of encampment, where he is destroyed, is located between the sea and the beautiful holy mountain. Since Mount Moriah is the location of the temple, the sea can only refer to the Mediterranean Sea. John the Apostle expands on this in his apocalyptic writings in Revelation, where this end times ruler also hears news from the armies of the east. As per Daniel, the area of their gathering is in the plain known as Megiddo, described in the book of Revelation as Armageddon. It is in this area that there will be a final outpouring of God's wrath upon the nations of the world. Upon these plains he will cease to exist. In John's account, he is destroyed supernaturally at the second coming of Christ, where he is cast alive into the lake of fire, while the remaining forces assembled are completely destroyed. And naturally, 2,500 years later, this prophecy remains unfulfilled. The entire account of this great war places Israel in the center of this age-old conflict. The king of the north will have the final victory over the king of the south, but he will meet his end in the land of Israel. But Daniel is not finished. There is still some closing elements relating to this entire prophecy, which confirms its last day application. See you in chapter 12, where it all comes to a grand climax. Until next time, Maranatha.